At dawn in the Forbidden City, a young prince was already awake, getting dressed quickly for another long day of studying and martial arts practice. At the same time, his sister was just starting her day quietly behind silk curtains, getting ready for lessons in poetry and calligraphy. Although they lived in the same palace, their daily routines couldn't have been more different. Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll explore the daily lives of princes and princesses in China's Qing dynasty. We'll look at how they spent their days, what they studied, and how their futures were planned from birth. Later on in this video, we'll also discuss their ranking system, which determined their privileges and stipends. From the moment they were born, the Qing Emperor's children entered a world of privilege, governed by strict rules and expectations. Their lives were carefully planned, with distinct paths for princes and princesses. Each child was raised from birth for their specific adult role within the empire. To better understand the lives of Qing princes and princesses, we need to first talk about the unique customs of the Qing dynasty. The Qing rulers introduced a blend of cultural practices into the imperial court, combining their Manchu heritage with adopted Han Chinese traditions. For example, traditional Chinese nobility placed a high value on scholarly achievements. While the Qing court continued this tradition, their Manchu heritage also celebrated martial arts abilities. As a result, Qing princes would start their training at a young age in horsemanship, archery, and hunting. These skills were seen as essential signs of leadership, representing the dynasty's nomadic origins. Language was another important aspect of life in the Qing court. Different from previous Chinese dynasties, the Qing royals and officials had to be fluent in multiple languages. Princes were required to master Han Chinese and Manchu language, and usually Mongolian. This was designed to help prepare them for the diverse empire they were expected to govern. The differences also extended to clothing and hairstyles. The most recognizable Qing hairstyle was the queue, known as bianzi. Men across the empire were required to shave the front of their scalp and grow the remaining hair into a single, long braid down their backs. This hairstyle became a powerful symbol of Qing rule. Customs aside, high infant and child mortality rates were also a harsh reality throughout the Qing dynasty, even within the Forbidden City's seemingly protected walls. Diseases, for which effective cures were often lacking, claimed many young lives. Take the long reign of the Kangxi Emperor as an example, with records showing that he fathered 55 children, but only 32 survived to reach adulthood. Now, get your tea ready and let's dive into the life of Qing princes and princesses. The birth of a prince, especially one born to the empress or a high-ranking consort, was a major event celebrated with lavish banquets and ceremonies, as each prince was a potential future emperor. From infancy, he spent his early childhood living separately from his mother, raised within the imperial nursery, surrounded by a dedicated team, including experienced wet nurses, palace eunuchs, and supervising officials who carefully watched over his health and daily activities. These caregivers were not merely servants. In the isolated early years of a prince's life, they became companions, sources of information, and occasionally influential figures within palace intrigues. Even at this young age, a princess' day followed strict routines. They woke early, dressed formally, and ate meals under careful supervision by palace staff. Their earliest lesson began immediately, focusing on proper manners, speech, and basic literacy. Such discipline was instilled from the start, ensuring their obedience and proper behavior. By around age 5 or 6, their structured life became even more demanding as formal education began. Each day typically started around 5 a.m. After quickly dressing and eating breakfast, the prince went directly to the palace classroom, known as the Shangshu Fang, to review lessons. By 7 a.m., intense lessons began, lasting throughout the day, with only brief breaks for meals. Princes usually studied alongside their brothers and other male imperial relatives. Renowned imperial tutors taught them Confucian texts, history, poetry, calligraphy, Manchu and Mongolian languages, religion, and proper court etiquette. Mistakes or laziness were met with strict discipline. including physical punishment. However, the most effective check on their behavior was the fear of being reported to the emperor, which could result in consequences such as losing favor or even jeopardizing their future claim to the throne. Afternoons were dedicated to physical and martial training. Evenings provided minimal relaxation, usually spent reviewing lessons or formally paying respects to elders, before bedtime around 8 p.m. Each day was carefully structured, preparing princes for future roles that demanded strict discipline. When princes reached around age 15, they officially transitioned into adulthood through formal ceremonies that blended the traditional capping ritual, 冠礼, with Manchu traditions. One of the first milestones after adulthood was marriage. Shortly after coming of age, a prince was carefully matched with suitable wives. The selection of his primary wife, known as Di Fujing, was especially important, reflecting not just personal capability, but significant political strategy. Primary wives were chosen mostly from Manchu banner families in order to create powerful alliances between influential clans and imperial family. The rules were strict, as a prince's household of wives and concubines would potentially move with him into the imperial harem if he eventually became emperor. If a prince ascended the throne, his primary wife would typically become empress. His official secondary wives, known as 侧福晋, could be granted imperial harem ranks such as consort or concubine. Other lower-ranking concubines, such as 庶福晋, were generally granted lower ranks such as noble lady, 贵人, or attendant, 常在 or 答应. Their ranks and future promotions depended on factors such as imperial favor, family background, and bearing children, especially sons. For princes, managing this complex household was crucial preparation for future imperial responsibilities. In addition to managing his new household, the prince began his formal entry into government affairs. He would handle official duties assigned by the emperor, such as assisting senior officials in the 6 ministries, participating in important state ceremonies, or joining traditional Manchu imperial hunts. Princes learned directly from the emperor and senior officials, their performances influencing their future opportunities for succession. This learning often occurred within a framework of strict formality. Personal interactions between emperor and prince were heavily governed by ritual, emphasizing hierarchy over simple family closeness. Establishing their adult life also involved receiving their own residential compound, known as fu, located strategically within Beijing's inner city. These compounds were far more than just simple homes. They were large institutions employing hundreds, sometimes thousands of staff, including tutors and advisors personally appointed by the emperor. These advisors closely supervised the prince's conduct, providing continued oversight and direct reports back to the emperor. This constant supervision meant that the princess had to always be displaying competence and loyalty, as any perceived mistake or failure could lead to losing imperial favor. This was amplified by the Qing's unique succession system established by Emperor Yongzheng after the succession chaos of the Nine Princes War. The Nine Princes War were one of the most brutal succession conflicts in the Qing dynasty, and if you're curious about it, let me know in the comments and I could cover it in another video. To prevent succession conflicts in the future, Yongzheng introduced the secret designation of the heir system, 密鉴皇储. Instead of publicly naming a crown prince, the emperor wrote his chosen successor's name on multiple documents. One document was sealed within a special box and hidden behind the Justice and Honor tablet in the Qianqing Palace, only to be opened and revealed after the emperor's death. An identical document was kept securely by the emperor, often carried with him or stored in another safe location, providing a safeguard against tampering with the primary copy. This system meant that any prince who demonstrated outstanding merit and earning the emperor's trust could become the next emperor. Knowing that the emperor was constantly evaluating them as a potential heir provided a lifelong incentive for princes to perform well in their responsibilities while carefully controlling their ambition and behavior. Unlike the brutal purges common in early dynasties, Qing princes who did not ascend the throne typically retained their ranks and privileges, and were expected to loyally serve the new emperor. While princes faced strict discipline and training for leadership, their sisters lived quiet and secluded lives shaped by different expectations. The birth of a princess was quieter compared to the arrival of a prince, with smaller court celebrations, reflecting the fact that daughters could not inherit the throne. From infancy, princesses lived in special palace quarters, separate from their brothers and secluded from the rest of the court. They were primarily cared for by palace maids, female attendants, and eunuchs assigned to their residence, supervised by their mother or adoptive palace mothers. Their early childhood focused on lessons in simple etiquette, music, literacy skills, and classic texts. They rarely spent time outside of their private areas and almost never formally interacted with their brothers, reinforcing strict gender separation from an early age. As they grow older, their formal education followed a different curriculum, aimed at preparing them for their future roles. A core part of their upbringing was the consistent emphasis on decorum, including strict guidelines on Manchu court dress and elaborate hairstyles. Princesses usually woke slightly later than their brothers, around 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., spending the morning getting ready with the help of their maids. Lessons focused on advanced court etiquette, traditional painting, calligraphy, embroidery, musical instruments like the guqin, palace rituals, Buddhist teachings, and classical poetry. Afternoons involved practicing traditional arts, reciting poetry, or doing embroidery within their quarters. They rarely took part in physical activities or ventured outdoors, always closely supervised by palace staff. The princesses' world was smaller and carefully controlled, preparing them for lives centered around diplomacy, marriage, and strict personal restraint. For Qing princesses, reaching adolescence around age 14 or 15 also marked their official transition into womanhood. This transition was celebrated through formal ceremonies that blended the traditional hair painting ritual, jili, with special Manchu customs, symbolizing their readiness for marriage and their defined adult roles. Following this transition to adulthood, a princess's marriage was carefully arranged by the emperor and his court. The most important alliances usually involved marrying princesses to powerful Mongol khans or princes. Sometimes high-ranking Manchu nobles were chosen as well. Preparing for a princess's wedding was an extensive affair, involving rituals that stretched over months. A crucial element was assembling her dowry, the scale of which was determined by her rank. This dowry functioned as the princess's personal endowment, intended to establish her and support her within her new marital home, rather than as a payment to the groom's family. It typically included valuables such as fine silk, jewelry, furniture, and other emblems that reflected her status. Depending on her rank, the dowry might also include servants or farmland to help maintain her standard of living. Once married, the princess usually departed the capital forever, beginning a new life in distant territories with limited personal freedom. Her role transformed into one of representation. She became a crucial link to the imperial throne, tasked with projecting Qing authority and maintaining relationships between her husband's clan and the court in Beijing. Every aspect of her behavior and household management directly reflected on the honor of the imperial family. Contact with her birth family was also often limited to formal letters and occasional emissaries. And if widowed, a princess was generally expected to remain with her late husband's family, upholding the alliance rather than returning to Beijing. However, not every princess shared this fate of distant exile. Exceptional circumstances or extreme imperial favor could lead to a different path. A prominent example is Gulun Princess He Xiao, Emperor Qianlong's youngest and most cherished daughter, known for her intelligence and martial skills. Emperor Qianlong openly lamented that she wasn't born a boy, whom he might have considered for succession. Instead of being sent to Mongolia, He Xiao was married to Fengshen Yingde, the son of Qianlong's powerful and favorite minister He Shen. This strategic marriage kept her firmly within Beijing's political center, granting her proximity to power, unusual for a Qing princess. Her life stands in stark contrast to the diplomatic isolation experienced by many other princesses. For the emperor's children, imperial titles were often granted after reaching adulthood or marriageable age. These titles were more than honorifics and clearly marked status and privilege within a carefully ordered system. Unlike previous systems based on birth order, Qing emperors personally decided which titles to grant his sons, basing the decisions on factors like demonstrated abilities, political loyalty, and personal favor. The Qing system also had unique rules for emperors' daughters. Earlier dynasties often used titles like 长公主 for the emperor's older sister to indicate her senior relationship to him. The Qing system, however, determined an imperial daughter's formal rank primarily by her mother's status. The official title was usually granted when she reached marriageable age, directly linking her rank to her diplomatic marriage duties. These guiding principles determined which title a prince or princess ultimately received, but the normal expectation was that all imperial children would receive formal titles. Let's start with the titles of the emperor's sons. Before receiving a formal title, sons of the emperor were informally called 阿哥, a Manchu term meaning young master, typically accompanied by their birth order, like 四阿哥 for the fourth prince. The highest possible title was Qingwang, or Prince of the First Rank. This title was granted sparingly by the emperor, usually to favored sons recognized for achievements or loyalty. Holding this title brought enormous benefits, with annual stipends amounting to approximately 10,000 taels of silver and 5,000 shi of rice. Each shi is approximately 100 liters. The right to maintain a large personal staff, often in the hundreds, and significant land grants. Their status was visually marked by permission to wear specific high-status colors like apricot yellow or certain blues. Robes known as mangpao, which were specially adorned with powerful five-clawed dragon-like designs, and hat ornaments often featuring pearls and rubies. Next was Junwang, the prince of the second rank, a high-status title but with less influence than Qingwang. Their annual stipend were set at approximately 5,000 taels of silver and 2,500 shi of rice. Their official attire was a less ornate mangpao that featured slightly less prestigious colors such as blue, browns, and darker yellow shades, with less elaborate hat ornaments and smaller gems. Lower-ranking titles include 贝勒 and 贝子, titles with Manchu origins. A 贝勒 received an annual stipend of around 2,500 taels of silver and 1,250 shi of rice. The 贝子 allowance dropped even further, typically around 1,300 taels of silver and 650 shi of rice. Both of these ranks had stricter limits on household staff and simpler official attire without dragon designs or expensive gems. Below these four primary princely ranks, the hierarchy of imperial titles continued through several lower tiers of dukes and generals. Unlike previous systems, where some titles could be unique, multiple individuals could hold these Qing titles simultaneously based on lineage and imperial grants. In addition, unlike many earlier dynasties, the Qing dynasty imperial ranks were not automatically passed down to the next generation at the same level. A son typically inherited a title one rank lower than his father's with each generation. This deliberate generational downgrade prevented the accumulation of power among distant imperial relatives and kept authority centralized with the emperor. Only a select group of families honored as iron-capped princes, 铁帽子王, for their exceptional contributions during the dynasty's founding, were allowed to pass down their title to a designated principal heir undiminished. Just as princes had a clear hierarchy, Qing princesses also had a structured ranking system that defined their status and privileges. Unlike princes, whose personal names were well recorded, princesses were primarily identified by their formal titles in official records, often leaving their personal names obscured. For daughters of the emperor or other high-status daughters of the imperial family, the term 格格, a Manchu word meaning young lady, could be used as an informal title before they received their formal title. Separately, 格格 could also be used as a special formal title, typically designating daughters of lower nobility fathers, such as 贝勒 or 贝子. The Qing system established two high-ranking titles reserved only for the daughters of the emperor, under the designation of 公主. The highest rank was 固伦公主, Gulun means state in Manchu, and this title was typically reserved for daughters born to the empress, though emperors could also grant it by special favor to daughters of high-ranking consorts. A Gulun Gongzhu received an annual stipend of around 400 taels of silver and 200 shi of rice, along with a designated household staff reflecting her status. Her status was also reflected in her attire, which included the use of quality silks, elaborate gold thread embroidery, and valuable furs such as sable or fox for winter. In terms of color, she could use high-status colors like apricot yellow alongside vibrant court blues, reds, and other rich hues, often featuring intricate phoenix designs and valuable jewelry like large pearls. Below that was the Heshuo Gongzhu, with Heshuo meaning region or corner in Manchu, usually granted to daughters born to imperial consorts. A Heshuo Gongzhu's annual stipend was typically around 300 taels of silver and 150 shi of rice, with a smaller staff compared to a Gulun Gongzhu. She also used slightly less fancy ceremonial attire, with less exclusive materials, more common court colors like blue and browns, simpler embroidered patterns, and less valuable jewelry and hair ornaments. Like the princely ranks, an emperor could have multiple daughters holding the title Gulun Gongzhu, and many Heshuo Gongzhu at the same time. Daughters of imperial princes hold ranks such as Junzhu for the daughter of a Qingwang and Xianzhu for the daughter of a Junwang, with further lower ranks for daughters of Beile, Beizi, and others. Ultimately, these Qing titles defined their rank and privileges, impacting everything from annual income to what they could wear, reinforcing hierarchy of the imperial court. What do you think of these seemingly royal lives? How would you have changed history if you were born a prince or a princess in the Qing dynasty? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to help me uncover more fascinating stories from Chinese history, please check out my membership and become a Noble Baoban. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Stay curious, stay magical.